we on?
Oh, yes, you're on.
Okay. Let me just say what a wonderful feeling it's been as I come here more and more, and I feel greeted, but I let it in more and more. And it helps that drive on 95 a lot. I'm so glad to be here. And that song was perfect. Okay? The title of my talk, the complete title, is Filling in the Blanks, Making Our Minds an Instrument for the Truth of God. So you know I work in metaphors a lot, probably, if you've been here before. Now, filling in the blanks often means filling in a blank with the right answer. Your answer is correct or incorrect. 1 + 1 equals
2.
Good. Today's daily words were
Inner peace.
inner peace. In the scarlet letter, Hester Prynne must wear this A, and that stands for... Oh my God! Apple? Did somebody say apple? Awesome. Interesting. Interesting. Today, we're talking about blanks that are not factual, informational, the ones we're filling in all the time without being aware of it. Filling in the blanks, often unconsciously. Today will be blank. My message today at Unity of Fredericksburg is going to go blank. We let the love blank. We might fill that in differently on different days. The words we fill them in with direct our decision, our lives, our moods, our relationships, how our day, and sometimes how our lives unfold. So this came home to me in a very big way when I was in Ohio a few years ago. They were screening, I think I told you they made a short movie of one of my short plays. I used to write plays. And it's nothing you've seen. It was on the independent circuit, the festivals. And it's called Nietzsche Ate Here. And the director lived in Ohio. And so he premiered it at this theater in Ohio. So it was very exciting. It was filled with people, and we had discussion afterwards. It was the first time I saw the movie, and it was very professional. It was a little slow. And I wondered if the audience was still watching. It kept on turning. Were they still watching, especially when something dramatic and really important happened? And so, actually, at that point is when the actress looks out the window, sees something, and looks back. He confronts the man who's just come into her diner. So it gives them a few seconds to think, what is this? What's happening? So I asked the audience when we did questions. So what Cheryl realizes at the moment she looks out the window was what? I wanted to see if they were still watching. Well, they were. So that was great. But what came out of their mouths was so interesting to me, because it was a few seconds. One guy raised his hand and shared a novel that he wrote in his head with those few seconds. Somebody else raised their hand, shared something briefer, but very different, very creative. People came up with all sorts of stories. And I thought, ooh, good. Okay, good. They were still watching. That's great. And they do what humans do. When we don't know, we fill in the blanks. And we construct our own stories. Now, it's not rocket science, but that had a real impact on me. It relates to so many of my issues, how I fill in the blanks. And you know I come here and talk about my issues and try to hope that it relates to folks. As Seneca said centuries ago, Roy suffers more often in imagination than in reality. And that might be true for you. We're built to fill in spaces. It's innate. That's what we do. To make up what we don't know. Nothing wrong with it. We see a movie, we see something on TV, what's going to happen, make up scenarios about what's going to happen at the meeting. It's stimulating, it's fun, it's engaging when we're involved like that. Now, I wonder how many of you filled in the blanks when Beverly sent out my title, about the title of this talk, filling in the blanks. He's going to talk about, I don't know. My titles aren't usually clear about what I'm talking about, though I hope the blurbs make them a little clearer. Like seeing the whole elephant, or last time I said dusting off your ruby slippers. What the heck? And in our daily lives, we fill in the blanks throughout the day. We write scripts all the time. They're not interested in me, so that means I'm not attractive. I'm boring. I didn't lose enough weight. I lost too much weight. That means no one will ever be attracted to me or ever interested in me. So now with that last one, we've not just filled in the blank, we've used those words to write a story which we might tell ourselves over and over again. Does that make sense? Do you relate in your own way? So we usually live unaware of how we filled in the blanks. But when we do and we live it, that becomes our truth. I didn't get the job, so that means I'll never get a good job. I'm not smart enough. Oh, she doesn't like Jewish Buddhist men from New York who go to Unity. It means this, not this. We fill in the blanks based on our past experiences, from messages we got from others while growing up. Watching parents, role models, watching them, fill it in. How about God is blank? How we fill that in often says more about us, doesn't it? How we've been conditioned by culture, family, religion, peer groups says more about us than about God. A Unity friend says, God created us in his own image and we returned the favor. So we fill in the blanks with messages that sometimes reinforce, I am not enough, I am not deserving, I will never be enough for my parents, for him, for her, for God, as opposed to a million other possibilities. Possibilities which don't devalue us, which don't put my whole esteem on the line from this one thing that happened when I was 10 years old. Now, back in elementary school, they didn't pick me for their sport teams because blank, I sucked. Actually, I think it did mean that. I did suck. I filled in the blank right that time, I think. We do fill in the blanks correctly at times. We really do. It doesn't mean we have to torture ourselves with it or keep on running that script in our heads and apply it to life situations through the whole decades. I don't suck at anything. Together, I don't suck at everything. That's what I mean. I don't suck at everything. Really. Really. We'll talk about it afterwards. So, but you get my point about how something then becomes universal in our lives, and it might be one thing. And it might not have been a traumatic thing. It could have been. We need to be aware of how we fill in the blanks, because those words can start a script followed by pages and years of us devaluing, minimizing, maybe abusing ourselves. Now think I've shared that powerful statement, powerful to me, is when I'm in my head, I'm behind enemy lines. Well, when I am in my head running an old script, I am definitely behind enemy lines. And it's like the cannon is pointing at me, but I'm the one who's going to light it. Those words become our story. We get wed to the story. We make it our identity. We accept it as fact, and not just something that's been a conditioned perception. Joel Goldsmith, Break the Fetters That Bind You. He tells us that everyone must learn to awaken in the morning and take hold of their own mind and decide whether one is going to accept any or every thought that comes to them. I do not permit my mind to be used by suggestion, by outside influences, or by outside opinions or theories. I make my mind an instrument for the truth of God. Now think about filling in today's blanks from that perspective. When I am in my head, I can be an instrument for God's truth or my own worst enemy. The power of God can flow out from within me, or I can feel unworthy, less than, damaged goods, and share that polluted thinking with others. We need to be attentive and compassionate towards our inner life, because I think we very often tend to feel responsible for what we do, but not for what we think, which is a big focus here in Unity and in the principles. Emmett Fox reminds us, thinking of yourself as a worm and a child of a worm is the quickest way to demonstrate a wormy existence. Crawling about mentally can only be the prelude to crawling about spiritually, morally, and even physically. We keep the blanks filled in with thinking that has worked for us or is familiar to us, even if they mean a wormy existence. But they're decades old very often. Thoughts we learn to use to survive, well, they're now automatic. In fact, at times I've forgotten they were once blanks that I filled in. You know what I mean? They were once blanks. And filled them in decades ago, but it's become cemented into this sentence. And then we live that as truth. Filling in blanks does give us some illusion of control. I mean, come on, it's hard living life without knowing. And we really never know. So we've learned to fill in the blanks. We live them as truth. Minds do that. At the same time, Alan Cohen reminds us that when we fill them in, what we fill them in with amplify the themes in our consciousness. And we increase the chances of a similar story, often non-productive and painful, repeating itself in our world. I found that's what happens to me. I don't know if that's what happens to you, but it repeats itself. Of course, in my talking about this, I'm really asking you to think about what themes do you amplify in your own consciousness. Our thoughts are prayers. We need to carefully choose the words which become the stories we tell ourselves, then which become the lives we lead. Now, if we run on automatic pilot, or unaware of, or we decide not to reword a thought, we are, as someone put it, tossed along in a stream of past conditioning and habit, battered by powerful currents, largely living at their command. Carrying the burden of the past is exhausting. James Hollis, I think I quoted last time, but he, in Swamplands of the Soul, how is that for a title of a book? He's a Jungian therapist, Swamplands of the Soul. He says, if you are stuck, it's because beneath the surface of any issue is a set of filaments which invisibly lead back to an earlier place. How many people make choices, offer advice, base relationships, and live by those filaments, holding on to the past? But are we victims? Unity says we have a choice. We just sang. We can change our minds. I spoke about that choice last time I was here. I will speak about it every time you invite me back, because I need to be reminded a lot. As thou seest, so thou beest.
Yeah.
Charles Fillmore.
Yeah.
As thou seest, so thou beest. And don't we all want to beest happier, more peaceful, have less suffering? That's how I want to beest.
Yeah.
Unity says we can be when we fill in the blanks with words that are spirit-driven rather than ego-driven, with thoughts from our higher self rather than from our frightened child. We're not slaves to the past no matter what has happened to us. We're not slaves to the past, nor are we slaves to the paths, literally, in our brain, the furrows that we've forged and built over the years. Literal pathways, furrows of fear, of resentment, of love, of joy. We can forge new paths. Neurologists, psychiatrists tell us that. We can choose to automatically go down the old well-tread furrow in our brain, which separates us from another, or we can go down a path in our brain that takes us closer to spirit. Even though it might be a new path, even though it might be covered over, even though there might be flying monkeys on there. If we're tired of being unhappy, anxious, scared, we need to let go of the old ways of thinking, release the known world. But who are we without our woes, our sadnesses, our fears, which have become our teddy bears, as we clutch them as if they offered safety? I love that image. That one was like, oh, I don't know who gave it to me, but thanks. As if there are teddy bears is what I thought of. Who are you without your story? Charles Dubose tells us to sacrifice what we are for what we could become, even if we don't know what that means. I want to share a story with you I heard from a friend who's an Alcoholics Anonymous. She has great sayings and great stories. I learned so much from her. Seems they were the group of 12-step folks who were going on this boat ride to an island called Serenity. Happy bunch of people. The boat pulls away, and then there's Mary, who's one of them. And the captain keep on going on, and so the 12-steppers yelling, Mary, swim. You're a great swimmer. It's safe here. Swim, catch up with us. She jumps in. She starts swimming. She gets a little winded. She goes under. And they yell, come on, Mary, you can do it. So she swims a little more. She gets a little winded, and they say, Mary, drop the rock. She doesn't know what they're talking about. She's swimming. She's doing quite well, but then she goes under. And they yell, Mary, don't be an idiot. Drop the rock. Well, she went down for the third time. She got her. There was something around her neck. This thing, this rock that they were all shouting about. And her rock was made of old resentments, intolerance, fear, anger. She managed to stay afloat long enough to kind of undo some of the strings holding them and let go of the rock. She swam a little, realized there was still a little more there. She let go of that, and then with a burst of energy, she swam to the boat. She caught up with the boat. They let her in. She was welcomed aboard. They celebrated without alcohol. Drop the rock. Can we release, let go, drop the rock we carry? Or the rocks, or the boulders, or the pebbles? Of limitation, of fear, of anger? If we don't, we'll probably continue to fill in those blanks in our lives with thoughts that separate us from one another, which cause us to suffer and perhaps to drown over and over and over again. So take a moment. What thoughts are weighing you down? What's your heaviest rock? Your lightest one? Perhaps it's a stone or a pebble. You're welcome to drop the heaviest. Yes, absolutely. But if it's the lightest, if you can drop the lightest, drop the lightest. Remember what someone said about forgiveness. If you're going to work on forgiving, you might not want to start with the Nazis. Spiritual progress, not perfection. We are co-creators with God. We can choose to co-create in a way that's beneficial, that's from my Christ light, my Buddha nature, or co-create from a way that's more challenging, filled with fear, driven by ego, Because that's what I did yesterday and the day before. That's how I've learned to survive. But as a wonderful Unity minister, Reverend Lafayette Seymour used to remind us, our job is to walk away from the manger, to get off the cross, and to arise from the tomb of limitation to be the gods we're supposed to be. So, when you have a blank space to fill in, do you script it with a crucifixion or a resurrection? W.H. Auden says we would rather be ruined than changed. James Hollis says we'd rather choose old dread rather than new angst. That's been true for me at times. Charles Schultz puts it another way. He wrote Peanuts. Life is like a 10-speed bike. Most of us have gears we never use. I've seen this as a mental health counselor. People don't always come to counseling, to therapy to change, to use new gears. People very often come because they hurt and they want to stop hurting. They want the pain to stop. I still want to carry this rock around my neck. It's a part of me, but can we work on it not being so damned painful? So they hope this skilled person, this therapy person, can make it stop hurting. Instead of, I am ready to do something differently, to try a new behavior, even though I'm frightened to death. In Greek theater, there was something known as deus ex machina, God from the machine. An actor playing God would be lowered down from the ceiling or come up from a trapdoor and resolve the mortal's difficulties, saving a seemingly hopeless situation. That's what gods do. They fix the pain, fix an unfixable situation. That's what they do when they decide to. Especially back in the Greek gods. Some people pray, God, please take away the pain. Fix this, work your magic miracle. Instead of, God, fill it with your presence. Fill me with your presence. I am willing to change my mind about the situation, to fill in the blanks with new words and behaviors. Spirit, help me see this as you see it. But it's our choice. So we come here to be reminded, as children of God, we can choose to let go, drop the rock. Each speaker reminds you of that in their own way. Dana reminds you of that in his way. Each one of you remind each other of that in your own way. We can choose to fill in the blanks with words reflecting the 5 unity principles or not. As the process of your life unfolds, who is at the helm? Is your higher self in command? Or do you give control to the child that is scared, that has been hurt? James Hollis has this great line, and he says, it's one thing to have a scared kid within us, as we all do. It is something else to turn the conduct of our life over to that child. Right? Oh, good. Yeah. Right? At times, I fill in those blank spaces with old, damaging, ego-reinforcing beliefs from childhood. At times, the SS Berkowitz is being steered by a 6-year-old. At times. Who's steering your ship?
Yeah.
How old is the person at the helm of your spiritual ship? Especially during those difficult, challenging times.
One more time.
Stop.
What's that?
Say that again.
One more time.
Say that
How
again.
old?
How old is the child steering you?
The quote? You want that quote again? Okay, this one's for free. It's one thing to have a scared child within us, as we all do. It is something else to turn the conduct of our life over to that child. That was pretty powerful to me too. And in seeing that, realizing that I do let a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old steer the ship. Not always.
This is Berkowitz.
So I ask you, who's steering your ship? How old is the person? The ages change. But when I fill in the blanks from the perspective of my old worldview, it guides me into turbulent waters. All hands on deck. James Bridges says, It's a protective shell we outgrow but accommodate to stay in for protection. And what I'm saying is, and I think what you know based on your responses, that protection comes at great spiritual and human cost. So what do we do? What do we do, Charles Fillmore? Charles Fillmore puts it really simply. For a healthy state of mind, let go of old thoughts and take on the new. Surprise, right? You never heard that before, right? We hear that all the time. We find both heaven and hell within our own consciousness, both the result of our own thought. So it's time to let your higher self steer your ship. Fill in those blanks with some kind of truth reflecting what you hear every week at Unity, rather than what you might have heard years ago. As he said, let go of those old thoughts, take on the new ones. Every day, every new experience is a blank canvas with multiple blanks to fill in. The Unity writer in the 1920s, Imelda Octavia Shanklin, reminds us that the you of today begets the you of tomorrow. To improve the product, the you of today must transcend the you of yesterday. So, when we walk out of here, let's all do or say or think something to transcend who we are at this very moment. Just at this very moment. Let's try a new gear. One that allows our mind to become an instrument for the truth of God. And then let's all sail onward. Namaste. And now, please join me in a meditation. Get into a comfortable position, letting the chair, letting the floor support you. And breathe. Breathe on purpose and just notice your breath. Breathe in and out at your own pace. When a thought comes to mind, welcome it and let it go. You can get back to your other life later. It's time to be still. I will be still and let the earth be still along with me. And in that stillness, I will find peace, for both my mind and my body shall rest. Both my mind and my body shall be still and open and receptive. And in that stillness, I breathe in the affirmation, I make my mind an instrument for the truth of God. I make my mind an instrument for the truth of God. We remember Joel Goldsmith's words, I do not permit my mind to be used by suggestion, by outside influences, by outside opinions or theories, for I make my mind an instrument for the truth of God. And as we sit in the silence, we are receptive to guidance from that inner voice that affirms, I make my mind an instrument for the truth of God. Notice the thoughts as you affirm that truth. And gather the thoughts you want to bring back with you to this room, to your spiritual community. As you gently, always gently, come back to this space, to people who see you as an expression of God and who can remind you of that whenever you need to. As we return to this space, we bring back what we need from this time, gently and with gratitude. And so it is, and shall be.